Armed men stormed my land with a fake warrant, sent by a power-hungry HOA president who didn't know I was a Marine vet. And my next-door neighbor is the damn county sheriff. They came thinking I'd fold. Instead, they ran for their lives. This is how suburbia declared war on the wrong man. You ever get the feeling that the world's gotten too soft? Like everything's measured in likes, lawn symmetry, and HOA-approved mailbox paint? Well, I'm not part of that world. My name's Frank Miller. I'm 58 years old, retired Marine Corps, and damn proud of it. I've got a piece of land just west of a town too small to make the news and too nosy for its own good. About 5 acres of honest dirt, oak trees, and a house I rebuilt with my own hands after leaving active duty. No wife, no kids, just me, my tools, a couple of stubborn chickens, and a peaceful silence that I guard like it's gold. The place is outside of what the city folks like to call the community boundaries. That means no HOA, no Karens in yoga pants telling me how tall my grass should be or what shade of beige counts as neighborhood neutral. That freedom? I paid for it in blood, sweat, and a couple busted knees. And until a few weeks ago, it was all mine. I first caught wind of the nonsense when I found a crisp, artificially scented envelope stuffed in the chain-link gate at the end of my gravel driveway. The letter inside had more capital letters and legal buzzwords than a Pentagon memo. Notice of violation, it began, as if I'd done something heinous. Something about non-conformity of external structure, unauthorized signage, and get this, unauthorized flag display. They were talking about the American flag flying above my porch, the one I'd carried back folded in my rucksack from Afghanistan. I chuckled, shook my head, and tossed the letter into the burn barrel with the rest of the week's junk mail. I figured it was a misdelivery or some overeager clipboard warrior. My property wasn't part of any HOA, never had been, never would be. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. 2 days later, I heard gravel crunching where no gravel should have crunched. A silver SUV, new, spotless, soulless, was inching its way up my private driveway. I leaned against my porch post, arms crossed, shotgun resting easy in the corner behind me, not threatening, just present. Out stepped a woman straight out of a suburban propaganda poster. Bleach blonde bob, pearl earrings, designer blouse too clean for dirt roads. She walked with the kind of confidence that comes from years of terrorizing bake sales and small-town councils. She introduced herself as Karen Davenport, president of the Cedar Ridge HOA. Like I gave a damn. "Mr. Miller," she said, smiling like a python under church glass, "we've received multiple reports regarding your property's non-compliance with community standards." "Ma'am," I replied, "this ain't your community." She blinked, momentarily thrown off. "Your parcel is adjacent to Cedar Ridge. We believe it falls under our extended oversight according to the revised zoning and annexation proposal." Key word being proposal, I said. "My deed's older than your subdivision. My land was here before your cul-de-sacs had names. I ain't under your rules." She ignored that entirely, pulling out a tablet like she was issuing field orders. "You'll need to repaint your home exterior to match natural earth tones. Our HOA palette does not include military green. Additionally, the sign on your gate that reads private property, trespassers will be shot, survivors shot again, is in direct violation of our community values." I smiled thinly. "It's in perfect alignment with my values." Her face tightened. "I'm sure we can resolve this amicably." "I am too," I said, and tipped my chin toward the gate. "You resolve it by turning around and getting off my land." She left reluctantly, promising to escalate the matter through proper channels. I didn't know then how far she'd go, but I knew people like her. They don't take no for an answer, until you make it stick. The next few days, things started getting weird. I caught a guy with a telephoto lens parked across the dirt road pretending to birdwatch. He got real nervous when I walked out with my shotgun slung loose. I didn't point it, just made sure he saw it. Then there were drones, little buzzing bastards hovering over my shop while I worked. One got too close and got itself a face full of rock salt. Not my fault, it fell like a wounded goose. I talked to my neighbor, Joe Ramirez, about it. He's my age, maybe a few years younger, still active. Sheriff of our county for the last 6 years and one of the few people I trust implicitly. We served together once back in 91st. He knows I don't get riled unless there's reason. "She's poking the wrong bear," he said, sipping coffee on my porch. "I've heard whispers. She's trying to expand HOA boundaries, real estate politics, wants to make your land part of their taxable control. More dues, more power." "Let her whisper," I muttered. "She steps on my soil again, she's gonna hear a whole different language." Joe grunted. "Just document everything. If this goes legal, paper trails win wars now, not bullets." He wasn't wrong. By the end of the week, a second letter came, this one on thick cardstock with gold lettering. It claimed a community enforcement team would be inspecting my property next Tuesday at 9 a.m., with or without my consent. Attached was what looked like a MRLI compliance warrant, signed by some HOA board member who fancied himself a judge. I stared at the paper, then stared at my fence, my tool shed, the flag waving overhead. They were bringing the fight to me, so I started preparing for war. The morning after that so-called compliance warrant arrived, I walked the perimeter of my property with a cup of black coffee and a growing sense of irritation simmering just under the surface. It had been a long time since I felt that familiar edge, the one that told me trouble wasn't on the horizon anymore. It was already in my backyard, crawling under the fence and pretending it owned the place. The drones came back before noon, whining overhead like mechanical mosquitoes looking for exposed skin to bite. I stood in the middle of my yard, arms spread, staring straight at one of them as if daring it to come closer. It hovered awkwardly for a moment, almost like it understood what kind of man it was messing with. Then it zipped back toward the Cedar Ridge houses, where the well-trimmed lawns sat like obedient soldiers in formation. By evening, I caught that same silver SUV from a few days ago idling at the end of my driveway. Through the windshield, I spotted a different guy. Bald head, thick shoulders, sunglasses too big for the late hour. Snapping photos of my porch and fence like he was compiling evidence for a trial I'd never agreed to attend. When I stepped forward, he floored it and disappeared down the road, tires spitting gravel. I tried to keep my cool. I'd fought enough battles to know not every fight needed a trigger pulled. Still, I told myself I'd start putting cameras around the yard. The little buggers weren't expensive, and the idea of turning their own snooping tactics against them gave me a nice, spite-flavored satisfaction. Later that night, I heard tires roll up my driveway again. I opened the front door to find Joe climbing out of his cruiser, holding 2 beers like a peace offering. We settled on the porch. He took in the gloom settling across the property, the oak shadows growing long and uneasy. "You sure you don't want me to run background checks on these HOA clowns?" he asked. "Could file a harassment complaint, get ahead of this." "I appreciate it," I said, taking a swig, "but a guy like me filing harassment charges? That's like a wolf reporting a sheep for bleating too loud." Joe chuckled. "Difference is this time the sheep have lawyers, and apparently a drone fleet." We sipped in silence a while. Crickets chirped. A breeze rustled the grass that, by Karen's standards, was at least 3/10 of an inch too tall. Finally, Joe pushed himself up. "You call me if anything escalates," he said. "Anything. I'll be here faster than your chickens run from a hawk." After he left, I tried to unwind. put on a Western, fed the chickens, cleaned my shotgun like it was a meditation ritual. Then I slept, sort of. There's a kind of sleep you get when you know you're being hunted. Light, twitchy, and ready to snap awake at the smallest sound. Sure enough, at 7 the next morning the banging started. I opened the door to see Karen standing there again, clipboard tucked to her chest like it was the Constitution, flanked by 2 men in matching windbreakers. They looked like mall cops who'd been rejected for lacking intimidation skills. Both wore side holsters and radio earpieces, very dramatic for a morning stroll. "Mr. Miller," she said, voice honeyed but razor-sharp underneath. "These are official compliance officers from Cedar Ridge. They're here to conduct today's scheduled inspection." One of the men stepped forward, posture rigid. "You are obstructing a lawful review of regulated property." "Regulated?" I asked, raising a brow. "Which law book says that? Or did you print a new constitution overnight?" Karen inhaled sharply. "Refusal to comply will result in significant fines and potential legal action. Please step aside." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even move. I simply looked directly at her and said, "Lady, step 1 more inch past this porch and I'm calling the real authorities, the ones who have badges issued by the state, not laminated in your office supply closet." The shorter officer lifted his chin like he wanted to prove something, but Karen snapped her fingers and he froze. She stared at me with cold triumph. "This isn't over," she said. "It never is with people like you," I replied. They retreated to the SUV, glaring at me like I was a national security threat. Karen rolled her window down before leaving. "You're surrounded by community, Mr. Miller. Maybe you should remember that." I smiled. "And maybe you should remember, this ain't your community." They sped off in a cloud of dust, and I stood there for a moment, breathing slow, pulse steady. But inside, something shifted. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was encroachment. This was a siege. I stepped back inside and set the shotgun near the door, leaning it just right so it caught the morning light. If Karen wanted war, she was making all the right moves, and I've never been the type to lose ground. They came on a Tuesday. I should have known the moment the birds went quiet. That thick morning silence, that unnatural hush that only shows up before a storm or a firefight, settled over the property just as the sun began peeling the dew off the grass. I was in the shed sharpening a chisel when I heard the crunch of gravel. Not slow, hesitant like before. This was confident, deliberate, like someone sure they had the upper hand. I stepped outside, wiping my hands on a rag, and saw them. 2 matte black SUVs crawling up my driveway like they owned it. Logos on the side doors read Community Compliance Division in gold serif letters. It was pure theater, cheap intimidation in fancy packaging. 3 men stepped out, not in polos this time. No, these guys were in matching tactical outfits. Vests, knee pads, utility belts. One had mirrored shades, the kind you wear when you want to look soulless. Another had a laminated badge hanging from his neck like a toy sheriff's star. The third was taller, broader, with that twitchy aggression you learn to spot in the military. The kind of guy who joined private security because no real agency would trust him with a loaded weapon. The tall one took the lead. "We have an authorized inspection order for this premises," he barked. I didn't move from the porch. My hand was resting on the rail, near the shotgun. "You're trespassing," I said flatly. "That paper's not worth the ink it's printed on." Karen's voice slithered into the scene before I even saw her. She stepped out from the back seat of the second SUV, all faux authority and spiteful cheer. "Mr. Miller," she chirped, "you've refused all previous notices. Under the amended oversight of the Cedar Ridge HOA charter, we are now empowered to enforce compliance through direct action." I blinked slowly, letting the words settle like flies on manure. You mean a fake order? Signed by nobody from a charter that doesn't apply to me? I stepped down one wooden stair. I'm not part of your HOA, never was, and this... I waved a hand toward the SUVs and her paramilitary cosplay squad. Is illegal as hell. Karen's face twitched, but she kept the smile glued on like bad makeup. You can call the sheriff if you like, but I suggest you cooperate. We wouldn't want this to escalate. The tall guy tried to move past me, heading toward my shop. That's when I stepped forward, racked the shotgun once, clean, crisp, and loud enough to make a point. Last chance, I said. Turn around, now. They froze, all of them. I didn't point the gun, didn't need to. Just held it low, angled toward the ground, finger off the trigger. But I made damn sure they saw it, and I made damn sure my stance said Marine, not mall cop. Then the guy with the fake badge tried something stupid. He reached behind his back, slow, dramatic, like this was a movie. I fired into the ground just off to the right. Not close enough to hit, but enough to throw dirt and gravel into his legs. The crack of the shot echoed through the trees like thunder through a canyon. That got their attention. The one with the badge fell backward, scrambled like a crab. The big guy cursed and took 2 quick steps back, hand frozen mid-reach. Karen shrieked, an ugly, high-pitched sound like a balloon letting out air wrong, and stumbled behind the SUV. Okay, okay, the tall one yelled, hands up. We're leaving. Good call, I said. They backed toward their vehicles, keeping their eyes on me like I was a mountain lion with a grudge. The guy with the badge tried to grab a clipboard he'd dropped. Leave it, I said. He left it. They piled into their SUVs and tore off down the driveway, one of them bumping the ditch and nearly losing a tire. As the dust settled, I stood there, breathing slow, steady, calm, like after a bar fight you didn't start but damn sure finished. Then, just as I lowered the shotgun, I saw the familiar flash of red and blue in the tree line. Joe's cruiser came up the road like Judgment Day in a Ford. He parked sideways at the end of the driveway, blocking any return trip. He stepped out, already radioing something in, hand on his sidearm. You good? He asked, walking up. They didn't even knock, I said. Joe nodded, eyes scanning the property. I got the call. Neighbors heard the shot. Figured it was you scaring off trouble. Figured right. I handed him the clipboard. He took one look, muttered Jesus, and shook his head. These guys are private security, he said. Not licensed in this county, hell, maybe not in this state. That badge? Worth less than a Cracker Jack toy. One of the SUVs had ditched a walkie. Joe picked it up, clicked it on. Voices were chattering, one of the men yelling that they left Slade behind. Slade? I asked. Joe frowned. Name ring a bell? Big one. Twitchy. Tried to act tough. Didn't say a word. Joe sighed. If he ran, we'll find him. But this just got real. We both looked out over the property. The peace I'd once had now came with a fresh crater in the dirt and the stench of manufactured authority still hanging in the air. War had come to my doorstep, and these bastards hadn't even brought a real warrant. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was scared. I faced things that would make most folks pray for death. No, this was something different. It was the kind of wakefulness that comes when you realize your enemy ain't just stupid. They're stubborn, petty, and convinced they're righteous. The morning after the standoff, I walked the property. Gravel still scattered from their hasty exit. A single boot, cheap and size too big, lay half buried in the ditch. A souvenir, I figured. I picked it up and set it on a fence post like a war trophy. The chickens eyed it suspiciously. Joe came by around 9, grim-faced and already on his second cup of coffee. He told me the 2 compliance agents had been processed overnight. Neither had proper licenses to operate security services in the county. Their employer, a shadowy outfit called Shield Corps Asset Solutions, had no local registration. The kicker? One of them, Slade, was wanted in Louisiana on charges related to assault and impersonating law enforcement. And guess who had hired Shield Corps for community enforcement operations? Karen Davenport, president of the HOA, self-appointed sheriff of suburbia. Problem was, she'd covered her tracks. The contract with Shield Corps was run through a front company, and she claimed she had no idea they used tactical uniforms or unregistered agents. Joe wasn't buying it, and neither was I. I started installing more cameras, the good ones. Night vision, motion-triggered floodlights layered around the house like a modern-day moat. I wired them into my old laptop, set up a little command center in the shed. I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was waiting. Sure enough, the retaliation came faster than I expected. First, a concerned citizen sent a complaint to the county zoning office, claiming I was operating a firearms training camp without a permit. Total nonsense, unless cutting plywood with a jigsaw and oiling my shotgun counted as combat drills. Then came the anonymous tip to the ATF about illegal weapons storage. Joe was furious. He helped smooth that one over before it even hit my mailbox. But the worst was the flyer. I found it taped to every streetlight on the road into town, white paper, bold font, and a smug little HOA crest in the corner. It read, "Community alert, dangerous individual operating outside HOA oversight, unstable veteran, gunfire on premises, families beware." They used my photo from a charity event last year where I'd worn my dress blues. Karen didn't sign it directly, of course, but I recognized her style. Always hiding behind paper, always pulling strings from the shadows. I tore every flyer down with a knife, drove straight to Joe's office and slapped the crumpled mess on his desk. "That's defamation," he muttered, rubbing his temples. "It's war," I said. Later that day, Joe came by with an idea. He wanted to nail Karen properly, not just on her HOA games, but criminally. "We need a smoking gun," he said. "You give her rope, she'll hang herself. But we gotta be ready to catch her doing it." So I kept up appearances, mowed the lawn, patched the porch, smiled and waved when Karen drove by, always slowly, always pretending she wasn't watching. Meanwhile, I set more bait, posted new signs, ran power to old floodlights, even reinstalled the "Trespassers will be shot" sign. But with a little red sticker that read, "Now with more witnesses." 3 days later, just after sunset, a motion alert popped on my laptop. One of the cameras behind the workshop had gone dark. That wasn't normal. I grabbed the thermal monocular Joe had given me years ago. We used to coyote hunt together before all this HOA nonsense, and slipped out the back door with my shotgun in hand. The brush along the fence line was rustling. Something was moving slow. Too slow for an animal. I scanned with the thermal, there to the left. Human shape, lean build, masked, moving low and careful like he'd practiced this. And he had something in his hand, a crowbar. Slade, the son of a bitch, had come back. I circled wide, quiet, boots silent in the dry grass. The cameras were still recording from the secondary angle. I triggered the floodlights, not all at once, just a few in sequence to funnel him toward the old shed. He took the bait. When he got close, his foot hit the buried can alarm I'd rigged near the base of the door. The sharp metallic rattle echoed, and he froze. Too late. I stepped out from behind the shed, shotgun aimed low but ready. "Evening," I said. "Lose something last time you were here?" He spun, started to run, and immediately got caught in the tripwire. Not a trap, just enough to trip him hard. He hit the ground with a grunt, dropped the crowbar, and scrambled like a panicked squirrel toward the tree line. But Joe was already there. Red and blue lights lit up the yard as the sheriff's cruiser pulled in, blocking the driveway. Joe stepped out, gun drawn but pointed down. "Don't move!" he barked. Slade froze. Hands went up. I lowered the shotgun. My heart was pounding but steady, controlled. Joe cuffed him while I collected the dropped crowbar and what looked like a folded map of my property, with hand-drawn notes. Later, back in the cruiser, Joe showed me the piece of paper he'd found in Slade's back pocket. It was a handwritten note, in cursive. "Be discreet. No weapons. Just get the footage. FM won't call the cops. He thinks he's the law." It wasn't signed, but I recognized that handwriting. Karen had made it personal. Now it was my turn. The morning after Slade's arrest, I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating non-stop on the nightstand. Missed calls, texts, voicemails. Not the usual junk either. I had 3 messages from Joe, one from a local reporter I didn't even know, and 2 numbers I didn't recognize. Something was happening. I threw on a flannel, poured myself the stiffest cup of coffee I'd had in years, and walked out to the porch. That's when I saw it. A news van, parked halfway down the road, angled to get a good shot of my house through the trees. 2 people were standing beside it, one with a microphone, the other with a shoulder camera. It was like watching vultures circling something they think is dead. I picked up the phone and called Joe. "They're already there?" he asked. "Front row seats," I muttered. "What the hell happened?" Joe sighed. "The Slade arrest? Leaked. Someone sent the footage to the press, including the note in Karen's handwriting. It's going viral. Local station ran a teaser this morning. HOA vigilantes or private militia. One man's stand against neighborhood tyranny." I nearly choked on my coffee. "That's the title?" "Wait till you see the thumbnail," Joe said. "It's you, holding the shotgun, mid-stride. Looks like a movie poster." I closed my eyes and took a slow breath. "This isn't what I wanted." "I know," he said, "but it's what you've got, so lean into it." By noon, 3 more news outlets had shown up. One tried to fly a drone over my shed again. That one got introduced to the business end of a slingshot and a rock the size of a golf ball. Didn't even have to reload. Karen, for her part, wasn't handling it well. That afternoon, the HOA released a statement, a masterpiece of lawyer speak, all passive voice and plausible deniability. They claimed Karen had acted without full board approval, that the community enforcement team had been poorly vetted subcontractors, and that any documents found on Mr. Slade's person were not indicative of official HOA policy. Translation: we're throwing Karen to the wolves. And the wolves? They were hungry. Turns out I wasn't the only one she'd targeted. Once the media sniffed blood, a whole parade of neighbors came forward. Stories poured in. People fined for planting the wrong color tulips, harassed for putting up holiday decorations too early, threatened for parking pickup trucks in their own driveways. One elderly couple had even been sued by the HOA for unapproved fencing, a waist-high wooden barrier they'd built to keep their dog from wandering into traffic. They'd lost the case, spent nearly $12,000 in legal fees. Karen had called their fence a threat to visual harmony. Now those people were on the evening news, clutching old photos and shaking their heads in front of a camera. The media pressure grew by the hour. Commentators started asking where the line was between neighborhood rules and organized harassment. Legal analysts picked apart the false compliance warrant like vultures on a carcass. One anchor even compared Karen to a homeowner's dictator in yoga pants. I didn't smile at that. Okay, maybe I did. A little. Meanwhile, Joe and I worked quietly behind the scenes. Every piece of Slade's arrest was documented. The note, the map, the unlicensed gear, the fake badge, Karen's fingerprints, not literal but close enough, were all over it. Joe pulled her email records through a court order and found messages coordinating with Shield Corps' leadership, Phrases like, handle this discreetly, he responds to intimidation, and avoid formal police involvement stood out like neon signs. With that, the DA agreed to bring charges: criminal conspiracy, unlawful surveillance, trespassing by proxy, defamation, and interference with a law enforcement investigation. Karen was officially under investigation. They served her the notice at a public HOA board meeting. A dozen cameras caught the exact moment her jaw dropped. She was mid-sentence, lecturing someone about mailbox height when two county officers walked in and asked her to step outside. Her expression, that toxic mix of entitlement, confusion, and fury, played on every local channel for 3 straight days. But she wasn't done. Even as her world fell apart, Karen clung to the idea that I was the enemy. 2 days after her public shaming, I got a certified letter in the mail. It was from Karen's personal attorney. She was suing me. The charges? Emotional distress, intentional intimidation, brandishing a weapon. Apparently, my defense of my own land had traumatized her. She claimed she couldn't sleep, had developed anxiety, and suffered permanent psychological damage from being in the presence of an armed man trained to kill. I read it twice. Then I laughed so hard I spilled coffee on the paperwork. Joe, of course, was less amused. He warned me that even ridiculous lawsuits could cause damage if they got dragged out long enough. So we countered. Not just with a defense, but a full-blown suit of our own. False accusations, attempted illegal entry, defamation, malicious prosecution. And thanks to Slade's arrest and Karen's handwritten note, we had hard evidence to support every single claim. Now the game had changed. We weren't reacting anymore. We were going on offense. I've never been a fan of courtrooms. Too much formality, not enough honesty. The last time I sat in one, it was for a buddy's military funeral. Folded flag, all rise, silence you could choke on. This one wasn't much better, though no one was dead. Yet. The courthouse was a bland government building with faded carpets and buzzing fluorescent lights, but it might as well have been an arena. On one side, Karen, dressed like a magazine version of Innocence. Soft colors, pearl earrings, the works. Her lawyer looked like he'd crawled out of a networking event in hell. On our side, me, clean-shaven for the first time in months. Button-down shirt, jeans that didn't have grease stains, and Joe sitting behind me like an armed statue in civvies. My attorney was a quiet woman named Rachel Kim. She didn't smile much. I liked her immediately. Karen's civil suit was first. Her lawyer opened with a performance so dramatic it could have won him a daytime Emmy. Claimed I'd assaulted and terrorized an unarmed woman performing community service. That I was a known extremist with a military background, and that my obsession with private property presented a clear and present danger to peacekeeping efforts. I nearly snorted at that one. Peacekeeping efforts, like she was part of the UN. Rachel didn't even flinch. When it was her turn, she calmly presented the security footage from the day Karen's goons stormed my yard. Showed the falsified compliance warrant, the aggressive behavior, and, most importantly, my restraint. No threats, no pointing the weapon, just lawful warning and a warning shot into dirt, all on my land. Then came the kicker. Rachel submitted a sworn statement from Joe, complete with department documentation, confirming that Karen had employed unlicensed private security agents to carry out unauthorized operations under false pretenses, and had lied about it. You could feel the temperature drop in that room. Karen's lawyer tried to pivot, said none of this was relevant to her emotional distress, but the judge wasn't buying it. Emotional distress, he said, requires some baseline of credibility. So far, I don't see any. Her case, dismissed, with prejudice. But that was just the warm-up. Now it was our turn. We filed criminal charges, but it was the civil suit that came first. And we weren't playing nice. Rachel laid it all out like a sniper lining up targets. Karen's false public statements, the illegally posted flyers, the harassment via third parties, the forged inspection warrant, the unauthorized surveillance, the written note recovered from Slade's pocket, the contract between the HOA and the unlicensed security firm, traced back through a shell company all the way to an account Karen controlled directly. Each piece of evidence hit like a hammer. By the third exhibit, Karen had stopped pretending to be composed. By the fifth, she was whispering frantically to her lawyer. By the time the video played of her being served mid-HOA meeting, her cheeks were blotchy and red, and I could see the whites of her eyes. The final witness was Joe. He took the stand like it was just another day at the office. Calm, steady, not a hint of drama. Laid out everything from the moment Karen first showed up on my property to the night Slade came crawling back. He confirmed that not only had she coordinated the campaign, but she'd attempted to bypass law enforcement at every stage. Then Rachel asked him, "In your professional opinion, Sheriff Ramirez, did Mr. Miller act within the boundaries of the law throughout these events?" Joe didn't hesitate. Yes. He acted responsibly. He notified law enforcement. He protected his property. He showed remarkable restraint. Karen's lawyer objected, claimed it was opinion. The judge overruled. "It's the opinion of the county sheriff. I'll allow it." We rested our case. The jury didn't take long. They found Karen liable on all counts: defamation, malicious prosecution, emotional abuse, conspiracy to trespass, and intentional infliction of harm through fraudulent means. The numbers added up fast. She owed me $120,000. When the verdict was read, Karen didn't even cry. She just sat there, hollowed out, like a woman who'd finally realized the empire she built on HOA bylaws and intimidation had crumbled under her own weight. But the fallout wasn't over. The HOA board voted to permanently remove her from leadership. She wasn't just voted out. They changed the bylaws to ban her from any future role in any association governance. She'd been the queen of Cedar Ridge for 5 years. Now she couldn't even speak at meetings without prior approval. Joe pushed for criminal charges, and while the DA didn't go for jail time, she was a first-time offender technically. She did get 2 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and a $50,000 fine, payable to a veterans relief fund that I personally selected. Word spread fast. The HOA scrambled to rebrand, re-elect, and cover their asses. Meanwhile, I used part of the settlement to expand my workshop. Built a new wing with proper insulation and a few new machines I'd been eyeing for years. Set up a veterans weekend project space, somewhere guys like me could come, talk, build, and be left the hell alone. Joe showed up at the ribbon cutting, brought brisket and a cooler of beer. "Still got the shotgun?" he asked. I nodded. "Cleaned and ready," he grinned. "Let's hope you never have to use it again." I looked out at the property. Quiet, safe, mine. "Hope," I said, "is not a tactic." It's been 6 months since the last courtroom door swung shut behind Karen Davenport. Cedar Ridge? It's a different place now. Quieter, less tightly wound. The new HOA board seems more interested in trimming overgrown rules than enforcing them. People paint their doors whatever color they want. One guy even put up a flamingo mailbox, no fines, no threats, just neighbors trying to be neighbors again. Me? I finally got the peace I fought for. The workshop's running smooth. 2 new vets come by every weekend to work on small projects. We built a custom smoker from scrap parts and baptized it with ribs last Saturday. There's laughter on my property now. Hammers, sawdust, country music from an old speaker that cuts out when it gets too humid. It's the kind of noise I like. The kind that means something's being built, not torn down. As for Karen, she sold her house 3 months ago. Packed up in silence, no farewell party, no bake sale. Her for sale sign had graffiti on it by the third week. Good riddance. Heard she moved to Arizona to start fresh. I hope the HOA over there is ready for her brand of hell. She tried to appeal the judgment. Court said no. Tried to claim bankruptcy. Judge said she could liquidate her SUV before they even considered it. I heard from Joe that she now works part-time at a garden center and glares at wind chimes like they insulted her ancestors. Life has a funny way of circling back. One morning about a month ago, I found something strange on my porch. It was a manila envelope, no return address. Inside was a single photo, black and white, grainy, obviously printed off a security feed. It showed Slade, frozen mid-sprint the night he tried to sneak back onto my land. Right before he face-planted into my tripwire, on the back in perfect handwriting, someone had written, "You got me good. Respect. S." I laughed for a full minute. Then I framed it, hung it right above the door in my shop, even hung a little plaque under it. Know your terrain. Respect your enemy. But always lay the damn tripwire. Last week, Joe came by for beer and brisket. We sat on the porch, feet kicked up, no drones, no SUVs, no clipboard commandos in sight. "You ever think about joining the HOA?" he asked with a smirk. "Only if they make me supreme overlord," I replied. "And even then, I'd probably vote to dissolve it on day one." He raised his bottle. "To quiet victories." I raised mine. "To loud lessons." We clinked glass. As the sun dropped low over the oaks, I watched the flag on my porch catch the wind. It flew high and steady. Same one I brought back from overseas, same one Karen once tried to say didn't belong. Well, it does, and it always will.